This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Today, we're going to pick up a topic around innovation leadership. The innovation leadership discussion that I want to have today is tied to a conversation that I had with some people over the last couple of weeks or so. And this resolves around what is the role of the CEO, what is the role of the board, and what is the interaction between the two of them when it comes to innovation and the innovation agenda. So today we're going to talk about that. Now, leadership support for innovation is critical to any organization. Now, that seems obvious, doesn't it? It seems obvious to me, but it's not. While any leader knows how to spell innovation, few senior leaders understand what's involved or how hard it really is, unless they come from an innovation background. So in today's show, we're going to discuss, again, the role of the CEO and how important that role is, the role of the board of directors. Keep in mind that the board is effectively the boss of the CEO. And then one solution to the challenges of a CEO and a board that may not have an innovation background is this idea of creating an innovation advisory board. And I'll talk about that. And I'll also talk about my own experience sitting on one of those innovation advisory boards for a large public company. So let's jump on in. Let's talk about the CEO. First of all, let's take a step back and not think about it just in the context of innovation, but what is the role of a CEO in leading an organization? Well, one is they set the vision. They set the long-range vision. Where is this organization going? What is its 3 to 5 year kind of targets of where it wants to get to, whether it be size and scale, geographic coverage, revenue, margin, industries, market share, whatever that is. What is that vision? Secondarily, then they have to establish a leadership team. Based on that vision, do they have the right set of leaders in the organization? Do they need to swap some people out? Do they need to upskill some people? Do they need to recruit certain skill sets that they just don't have today? They need to define the objectives for the org. And the way I describe this is vision's the long-range kind of target. The objectives are the breadcrumbs to get from where you are today to get to that long-range vision. And there's nobody else inside of an organization that can own that other than the CEO. So if the objectives are not clear, concise, easily measurable, then your opportunity for success is pretty slim. Now, I talked about in a previous show how I'm a big believer in OKRs, objectives and key results. You can go online. There's a bunch of blog posts all over the internet. There's been books published by authors about OKRs. I don't believe in the full OKRs. We use a kind of a modified set of how we think about OKRs where I'm CEO at, but we have found them to be pretty effective at trying to be as clear as possible all the way through the entire organization about what our objectives are, and then what are those key results? What are those steps we do to get to those objectives? So a CEO has to define those objectives. And the biggest challenge I see for a lot of CEOs is they're just not very good at setting objectives. And the CEOs have to hold themselves and others accountable to achieve those vision and objectives. Now, to achieve all of this, right, the vision, getting the leadership team, setting the objectives, holding themselves accountable, they have to craft a structure, an org chart, roles, responsibilities, and a budget which the board approves, or in some cases will disapprove. And so, how does innovation fit into all of this? Well, one is innovation should be part of how an org achieves its vision. So how do you get to that long-range vision? What's the role of innovation to uncover, discover, create, prototype, experiment in areas to get the organization from where they are today to that long-range vision. The structure of the organization should also clearly include innovation to achieve its objectives. Who runs what I refer to as the Innovation Program Office, or IPO? In an Innovation Program Office, it's not the people who are coming up with the ideas. That's not the role of IPO. An IPO's role is really around the operations of the innovation activities. Who runs the idea management system? Who's the one that kind of tracks the metrics and pushes people to hit their innovation objectives? It works with legal, maybe, and identifying ideas that have come into IMS that potentially could be patentable. It's really the behind-the-scenes engine, because innovation's not a team. Innovation's not an individual. It's a capability. And an innovation program office is that support infrastructure to allow everybody else to be innovative. So you need some form of an organization to achieve this. And innovation should be funded and resourced to the appropriate level to enable those vision objectives. So again, where does innovation fit in? It needs to be part of that organization. You need to have the structure that clearly includes innovation to achieve the objective, and you need to fund it and resource it. Funding is just dollars. Resources is people and time. If you don't put all three together, then you're really not serious about innovation. And so this funding and resourcing tends to be the one area where a lot of organizations struggle. They say, "Oh, we've already got it in the budget. We'll just include it in. We'll just take it out of whatever our current spend is." That doesn't work. And so therefore, the role of the CEO is to be committed, set aside people, set aside time, set aside those monies. And also the role of the CEO is to encourage and hold their leadership team accountable for innovation. Now, what's the most common reason CEOs don't provide the leadership needed when it comes to innovation? They only fund where they have clear line of sight of the results. The CEO has a set of dollars, and typically a lot of CEOs will only fund where they have clear line of sight, and that is pretty restrictive. And so that becomes one of the areas of how where they run into the structure or this challenge of the CEOs. They're not comfortable with the unknown and associated risk. Maybe they have a weak relationship with their board, and they're not willing to push and ask for bigger budgets. Or they're on shaky ground with their board because of some past mistakes or failures or challenges in the organization, or they just don't believe in the value and impact of innovation. In some cases, the CEO will say they understand the value of impact, but they really don't. They don't know how and don't want to go ask for help. So what are you to do if you are or you want to be an innovation leader in an organization where the CEO is not 1,000% engaged? One is start small. Get an early win under your belt. Find that hidden project where someone else is doing it in stealth, and then get behind it. Lay out a clear plan and metrics that can easily digest and share with the leaders and their board. Let the CEO take credit without you getting your nose all bent out of shape. Put them in a position to gradually increase their support. They don't need to be all in from the start. They may need to just grow into it. Now, how long should this take? As long as there is progress, then stick with it. If after concerted effort there's no movement and support, then maybe this org may never get there, and that's a career choice for you. For me, I came from a CIO, then a CTO leadership role of innovation, and when I retired from HP, I thought I was retiring, but got convinced to take a CEO role. So now I'm sitting on the other side of the table. Let me tell you, it was a lot easier on the other side to sit there and complain and whine and moan. Oh, the CEO doesn't get it. On this side of the table as the CEO, you're juggling a lot of priorities. And when you inherit an org that doesn't have innovation at its core, then it takes time, a lot more time than you think. 6 months after I took over as CEO, I had Jeffrey Moore on this show, and he reminded me that now I'm the problem because now I'm the CEO. He was on promoting an update to his seminal book, Crossing the Chasm. And he did take a lot of fun out of reminding me that when I was CTO at HP, it was easy to complain about the board or the CEO. But now that I sit on the CEO side of the table, I'm now the problem. I thanked him. And I'll include a link to that if you want to go back and listen. Jeffrey's been on the show probably some of the most times of any guest we've ever had on the show. I just believe in his writings, but you can hear him poke at me and challenge me. So hopefully I'm not one of those CEOs who don't get it, but time will tell. We're going to be right back after this break and continue our conversation on innovation leadership. Welcome back. While many will focus on the CEO as the one who has to get it, when it comes to innovation, the board of directors plays a critical role. Now, keep in mind that the board of directors is the boss of the CEO. The board has the right to hire, fire, discipline, increase pay, reduce pay, give more stock, take away options. They have that right as the board of directors. So, in effect, the CEO works for the board. The board, therefore, plays a critical role. In innovation, we tend to put so much emphasis on the CEO. I want to talk specifically in this segment about that role of the board. Now, in addition to being the boss of the CEO, the board effectively has control of the budget. That's a key resource that innovation needs to do what it needs to do. No funds, no oxygen for innovation. A board's commitment to innovation is shown by, one, the time they spend talking about innovation or evaluating innovations in their board meetings, and their willingness to make it a priority in the budget process. Also, it's their understanding and are they comfortable with the risks associated with innovation. Not everything works out in innovation projects. Projects are high risk, and thus they have a high failure rate. And let me speak from experience. A lot of organizations have, in leadership, have very little tolerance for any kind of failure. They have been trained up over the years that perfection is what the target should be. In innovation, there's no such thing as perfection. So the board has to get comfortable that these are high risks and therefore they're going to have a high failure rate. They need to work with the CEO and the leadership team to set some realistic, high quality innovation metrics that everyone gets behind. When I was at HP, I spent, probably 3 years working with the board to define good, high quality metrics. And let me tell you what are not good metrics, such as the number of ideas submitted. That is a totally bogus metric. The total ideas submitted is absolute garbage. It's not about the number. It's about the quality of those ideas. I've seen organizations put this metric in place, and then it's coming up at the end of the year, and everybody wants to hit that metric. And all of a sudden, the idea management system explodes with ideas, and then you go in and you look at them, and they're all garbage. People are just clicking through just to put something in so it counts towards meeting the objective and meeting their bonus, whatever it is. Now, I've talked about good, high-quality metrics in the past, both on this show, but also over at the blog, over at philmckinney.com. So you can check it out over there and hear more about metrics. Now, what I'm a big believer on is there's no magic set of metrics. You need to create ones that work with your organization, with how your management thinks, how your CFO thinks, how your board thinks. And in fact, when coming up with the metrics, the CEO should submit the innovation metrics to the board and explain why these are the right metrics, the right high-quality metrics for this organization. Another proof point that the board is behind innovation is how patient they are. Innovation doesn't have a predictable nature to it. The boards of directors, particularly at public companies, tend to get tied up in doing things on a quarterly basis. They got to issue the 10Q if you're public. You got the end of year results that could move your share price. Things tend to be very short-term focused. Board CEOs and leadership within organizations that want to have high innovation impact have to be schizophrenic. You do not get a pass on meeting the quarterly objectives, but you also need to make those investments and commit those resources to achieve the long range vision, and innovation plays a key role in that. Now, one way a board can convey their support if they truly are committed to innovation is how they protect the CEO when it comes to other stakeholders such as shareholders or investors. By protection, I mean, are they willing to step in and reinforce that the board is fully supportive of the innovation investment, the innovation risks? Now, that seems obvious, right? Yeah, okay. If the board goes through and looks at the budget and says, "Oh, we're going to commit X, hundreds of millions of dollars to innovation," we're behind it. I've seen many boards duck for cover at the first sign of rough waters around innovation. Soon as a project doesn't come out to fruition, or there's a project that fails in a public way, everyone is looking for the scapegoat. They're looking for someone to hang the problem on. And the board runs for cover and leaves the CEO to the wolves. If that's the case, that is a highly ineffective board, and a board that just doesn't get it. How can you expect a CEO and their team to have innovation confidence, the confidence that they are going to be supported to drive innovation, if the board is not willing to be that critical backstop? In my mind, no confidence, no innovation. The biggest risk I see for many organizations is that most boards do not have members who come from an innovation background. Few boards have CIOs or CTOs on their boards. Most board members come from a sales background or a CFO background, and maybe someone with a legal background. Those are not roles that inherently have innovation at their core. And while innovation is now part of MBA curriculums, you need people on your board who have lived it as their primary responsibility, not as a course, right? Would you have someone on your audit committee that the last time they looked at a financial P&L was in high school or community college? No. You want people on your audit committee that have a strong finance background. You need people on your board that have a strong innovation background. In fact, the day I was announced as CTO at HP, the first thing I did was have a meeting with the HP board of directors, specifically the technology committee in the board. Well, there was a little bit of intimidation there, but that showed that the board was interested in hearing my thoughts, my ideas on how I thought about technology and innovation and products and HP's market, HP's opportunity for success. So how does the board get the input and guidance on how to encourage and support innovation in an org that's taken a critical fiduciary role? The board has a fiduciary role. One is find outside consultants that can train the board. These are consultants who really have done it, not the typical consultants. And have the innovation organization meet with board members one-on-one to help them get up to speed. That's the role, if you're an innovation leader, is to help educate the board. And find organizations that have innovation at their core. And also think about creating an innovation board of advisors. While the idea of creating this sounds great, it's a lot harder to form and to run than it sounds good. And that's a topic that we're going to cover right after this short break, so don't go anywhere. One way to help the CEO and the board embrace innovation when it's not part of their just natural DNA is to recruit an innovation board of advisors. This board of advisors should contain the innovation leader, not CEO by default, not the CTO if they're not driving innovation. Whoever is the innovation leader inside the organization, with the other members being innovation leaders from outside of the organization. Who should be good targets for being members of the Innovation Advisory Board? Proven innovation executives who have lived it at the scale of your organization. So if you're a small organization, you can find an innovation leader in a comparable size organization. If you're a large multinational, you need to find an innovation thought leader who's run innovation at the same scale as you. The key here is that they need to be proven. They need to have had big impact innovation success. And also my guidance, no consultants. No consultants without operational experience. There's a lot of consultants. There's big five consulting firms out there that are all trying to position themselves to play this quote innovation advisory board role. It's a big difference from reading a book than it is from living it in the trenches. And if you can find people who've done it for years or decades, which would be pretty hard to do, but if you find those, then those are the people you want on your innovation advisory board. Now, this innovation advisory board then meets with the organization leadership and periodically with the board of directors. It provides guidance and feedback on the innovation priorities, the innovation processes, metrics, etc. It should report to the CEO on what's working and what needs support and changes. It reports to the board of directors in what we call open session. Open session means it's the board, the CEO, and their leadership. It's also an executive session, which is just the CEO and the board. And then it also has an opportunity in what I call private executive session, which is the innovation advisory board just with the board of directors. And that includes not having the CEO in the room and not having the innovation leadership in the room. This is where the board can hear directly from this advisory board on a critical function like innovation and have this conversation. And this is so that all levels can hear and get the feedback they need. Now, this requirement of being able to have access to all these different levels tends to be the roadblock when I'm having conversations with CEOs. They don't like letting outsiders have direct conversations with their board. If you don't trust them, then they should not be on your innovation advisory board. You need to get comfortable that it's in the best interest to get everybody feeling comfortable of sharing and discussing, and that you don't always have to be in the room. And so the CEO needs to take this serious. They need to take it really serious. And as I said, if you don't trust the people on the board, then you got to not recruit those people for the board. Now, let me share with you a little personal story. One of my most rewarding experiences was when I was asked by Roche to be the first outside member of their innovation advisory board. Now, if you're not familiar with Roche, they are a $233 billion US medical company. They're in pharmaceuticals, they are in medical devices. Their innovation advisory board was tasked to help their innovation management teams get fresh eyes on what they were working on and to help encourage and find ways to significantly increase their innovation funnel. Now, I had no background in healthcare other than my wife is a nurse. And so that's my total connection to the healthcare industry. Now, in addition to just filling up the innovation funnel, they included improving their innovation skills, their capabilities, their processes. That's where I could contribute. Given my background, I was CTO at HP at the time, and having built the innovation program office for HP from zero, nothing to having it standing up as an organization. Now, in this case, not only improving the skills and capabilities and processes, it's also engaging in idea evaluation and selection. So it was, going through the idea management system and seeing what ideas were being submitted and asking questions to encourage maybe teams to take an idea and think about it differently. Now, I was on the innovation advisory board at Roche for 3 years, long time. And we were focusing on one specific area. We ended up locking on really one division of Roche in order to kind of get the advisory board up and running and to see what we could do. And this was around diabetic care. So if you are a type 1 or type 2 diabetic, the role that Roche plays typically for a lot of people is through testing of your blood to see what your blood glucose levels are, to know whether or not you need to take insulin or some other kind of medicine. In this area that we particularly focused in on was the explosion of people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes means, things like your pancreas has failed. A type 2 diabetic is what we would refer to as lifestyle, meaning most people that are type 2 diabetics are morbidly obese. The foods they eat contribute to an increase in their blood glucose levels, etc. And Roche was focused on the whole thing around test strips, which is a big moneymaker. You get a meter from Roche or any of the other companies, and you put your test meters in and you test. Now, the challenge, though, is there was this big explosion in type 2 diabetics, but type 2 diabetics are not what Roche calls high testers. High testers are ones that use a large number of strips per day. If you're a type 1 diabetic, you're using 6 to 8 strips a day. If you're a type 2 diabetic, you're using 1 or 2 strips per day. And I knew nothing of this space. So I had Roche send me one of every kind of blood glucose test meter and test strips. And for the 3 years I was on the board, I tested my blood every morning and every night. Now, my philosophy around innovation, and if you've listened to this show, you've heard me talk about this before, you cannot innovate if you do not live it. So in this case, if I was going to help Roche think about type 2 diabetes, I needed to go through that experience. Now, I got really good at predicting what my number would be before I tested. It did cause me to change my eating habits, which was an interesting side effect. When you see what that slice of chocolate cake for dinner last night does to your numbers in the morning, you start adjusting your eating habits. You start thinking about that dessert saying, boy, if I eat this dessert, what is my blood glucose numbers going to be in the morning? The one thing I do not miss is the pricking of the finger twice a day. Painful, and it takes a toll on your fingertips. Now, I'm not in a position where I can share the ideas and the innovations, but as I said, I was one of the most rewarding innovation experience I have ever had. So what did I learn? Innovation advisory boards can play a critical role in helping to bring outside perspectives. Innovation advisory boards are outside validation of what and why you do the things you do. Key for innovation leaders when dealing with the CEOs and the board. A lot of innovation leaders will bring McKinsey, Deloitte in as, quote, validation of their process. They are not the best outside validators because those consultants have never done it. They've never sat in the seat. They've never had to create the innovation funnel. They've never had their job contingent on being able to have successful innovations. So if I was going to set one up today, find the best people, be prepared to pay for your board membership. Look, you pay for your board of directors. Why not your innovation advisory board? Set clear focus and expectations. Make it real, not the typical advisory board window dressing. And give them visibility to your leadership and board, and also plan a rotation. Rotate the members of the board out. Get fresh blood in. In fact, board of directors should do this themselves. If you find yourself looking for how to engage your CEO board or looking to establish an innovation advisory board, reach out and let's talk. Drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. More than willing to help, more than willing to give you feedback. And if you got an interesting advisory board, I might be interested. So drop me a note, phil@killerinnovations.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal team or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas.
It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 Minutes to New Ideas.
You want to know the secret to take ideas and make them real innovation? It is what I call the daffodil principle, which I learned or more likely stole from an article published by Geraldine Edwards. In one of the small mountain communities in the Sierra foothills, there's a church. If you take the time to pull off the road and walk around the side of the church, you'll see a hand-lettered sign pointing to the daffodil garden. A quick walk down the path and you'll see the most unbelievable sight. It looks as though someone had taken a basket full of daffodil bulbs and tossed them across the mountainside. The flowers were planted in patterns of orange and white and yellow and pink. Each different color variety was planted as a group across the 5 acres of flowers in the garden. Now I can imagine your first question. Who took the time to create this 5-acre garden? This was done by just one woman. On the patio of her house is a poster. Answers to questions I know you are asking. The first answer was 50,000 bulbs. The second answer was one at a time, by one woman, 2 hands, 2 feet, and a very little brain. And the third answer began in 1958. There it is, the daffodil principle. For me, the moment I heard this story for the first time was life-changing. I thought of this woman who for decades had planted one bulb at a time to bring her vision to an obscure mountain area. Think about that for a moment. Her planting one bulb at a time, year after year, had changed the world around her. She had created something of incredible beauty and inspiration. The principle her daffodil garden taught is one of the greatest principles of success. That is, learning to move towards our goals and desires one step at a time, often just one baby step at a time, and learning to love the doing and learning to use the accumulation of time. When we multiply tiny pieces of time with small increments of daily effort, we can change the world. Why did this principle have such a significant impact on me? It is that reminder that if we do what needs to be done each day, no matter how small the step is, we will make progress towards our goal. When it comes to taking ideas and turning them into innovations, the impact from accumulating effort, no matter how small, can be the difference between try and success. I'm not saying that it's easy. For me, it's easier to procrastinate. I am a world-class professional procrastinator. Just ask my wife. Yet, I've had to put in place some learned habits to ensure that what needs to get done gets done. Each week, I know that the scripts for my radio show will not write themselves. So what do? I get up at 5 a.m. every morning, just as I'm doing at this very moment, and I spend about an hour on the scripts. In any given week, I put in 8 to 10 hours on each script for the 1-hour radio show, and then I record the show over the weekend, then repeat it each week for 14 years. My radio show and podcast are my example of the daffodil principle. Starting in 2005, doing the small daily task that led to each episode of the show. 50 shows each year builds a season, and we are now starting our 15th season. In 2009, the back catalog of the shows was discovered by my agent, Mark Gerald, who then helped translate that into a book deal. The book then opened the door to have the podcast become a nationally syndicated talk radio show on Biz Talk Radio. All of this came about by getting up each morning and spending 1 hour a day writing scripts and stories for my podcast and radio show. While I was successful in applying the daffodil principle to my show, there are many ideas that I failed to apply the principle to, and as a result, did not see them become a reality. Applying the daffodil principle doesn't require special skill. Just having a goal and then having a commitment and tenacity to do the daily task that needs to be done, no matter how small that step is. What if The hard questions we should ask ourselves are those what-if questions. What if I had taken one of my ideas decades ago and had worked away at it one bulb at a time through all of those years? Just think of what might have been achieved. So what is stopping you from creating your version of the daffodil garden? It is not too late. Start tomorrow. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Kill Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.